So thank you all very much for joining us this afternoon. I'm Liz Perry, the director of the Harvard-Yenching Institute, and this is the fourth annual public roundtable that the Institute has convened. We did one several years ago on the topic of explaining the rise of China, a challenge for social science theory. That was followed by one 2 years ago on the question of varieties of Asian socialism. And then last year we did a comparison of China-India governance issues in the two giants of Asia. And this year we're focusing on the topic of cross-national lessons and what East Asian countries may be learning from each other today. The topic for today's session was motivated in part by knowledge that some of our panelists were working in one way or another on this topic. In part, however, the topic was motivated simply by the very tense geopolitical climate that currently exists in East Asia, with the protests concerning the Senkaku Diaoyu Islands, with tensions on the Korean Peninsula and so forth, and it seemed like a good moment to step back and think not only about the historical precipitants of contemporary conflicts, but also about the broader context of East Asian relations and connections, economic, cultural, social, as well as strategic. Those, of course, who work on traditional East Asia are used to thinking of East Asia as a coherent unit, a unit with deep cultural and political interconnections, a Confucian culture region across which ideas flowed quite easily since China, Japan, Korea, Vietnam all shared a written classical Chinese language in which those ideas could be communicated. But what about the situation today when there no longer is classical Chinese to communicate in? Even most people in China can no longer read classical Chinese, let alone in Vietnam, Japan, and Korea. So what is the state of interconnectedness? Is East Asia still a meaningful region of comparison, or would we do better to jettison the idea of East Asia, not have to learn all those difficult languages, and instead turn to different kinds of comparisons, India, China, Japan, Germany, Korea, Brazil, and so forth. So this panel is to think broadly about the nature of East Asian connections, not only political connections, also cultural connections, hopefully beyond the sort of obvious ones of karaoke and the Korean wave. Also political, economic connections. Can we still speak of an East Asian model of state-led development, as many were fond of doing a few years ago, or does that no longer hold true? What are the actual flows of information, patterns of imitation, emulation that we see these days? What lessons are and are not actually being transmitted across East Asian borders, and why? So we have today a number of distinguished panelists to talk informally about these questions, and there also will be lots of opportunity for give and take from the audience. As all of us living here in the Boston area are only too well aware, this has been a truly tragic and trying week. We have also been asked by the mayor of Boston to observe a moment of silence at 2:50, which is the time a week ago when the Boston Marathon bombings occurred. And so at 2:50, we will take a moment just quietly to think about that event and pay honor to the victims of it and their families. I've also been asked to make an announcement that this evening there is a New England China seminar in memory of our late colleague Stuart Schramm, a great student of Mao Zedong and Mao Zedong's political thought. And that seminar will begin at 5:30 over at the Fairbank Center in Segis South, and you are all welcome to attend that. But on this panel, actually we have two panels today. We have 6 panelists, and the first panel will look particularly at economic relations within East Asia, political economic concerns. And our 3 panelists here include Professor Sebastian Heilmann of Trier University. He will then be followed by Professor Zhu Xufeng of Tsinghua University, and Professor Zhu will be followed by Professor Nishino Junya of Keio University. So we'll begin today with Sebastian Heilmann, who is Professor of Comparative Government and the Political Economy of China at Trier University in Germany, the birthplace of Karl Marx, as I'm sure all the Chinese members of the audience know well. He has published extensively on China's political system, political economy, and economic policy making, and currently he heads up a multi-year project research group on industrial and technology politics of the PRC that is funded by the German government. So, Sebastian, please get us started.